Hi y'all, welcome to Donna's Farmhouse Kitchen. Well, today we're starting something brand new. We are doing reading with Skye. She's only 5, so she can't read a book yet, but I'm going to read the story. She's going to enjoy it, and I hope you will gather around your children and your grandchildren and let them enjoy it as well. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this book. This is called The Adventures of Larry the Squirrel. Let me show that to you. And the author of this book is Justin Thompson, and I just happened to go to high school with his parents. Now they have a son that is an author of this wonderful children's book. So I hope that you will go to Amazon and get your copy and read it to your children or your grandchildren like I'm going to do. So let's get started with The Adventures of Larry the Squirrel. Now, isn't he a cute squirrel? One morning as I was waking up, I realized that there were over a dozen men around my home. They were armed with axes and chainsaws. I was scared out of my mind, not knowing what the men were about to do. A huge truck came pulling up with a crane on the back. They backed it right up to my front door and went to work. As the men cranked up their chainsaws and lifted their axes, the sound became deafening. As the first swing came crashing in, I ran as quickly as I could to hide in a corner. It seemed that it was all over for me and my home. It was about to come crashing down. I thought to myself, what am I doing hiding while these men are destroying my home? So I climbed out of an open window, ready to jump on the first person I saw. But when I looked down, I was completely surprised to see that the place where I had lived for the past 5 years was still put together. The men had torn my home from its foundation and placed it on a truck without breaking it apart. The men had quickly loaded up their vehicles and were already halfway out of the gate. As the truck began to pull away with me still inside, I quickly climbed back in where it would be safe and waited to see where we were going. The wind would almost blow me over as I would peek occasionally to see if I could tell where we were headed. As we passed the road signs, I could tell that this was going to be a long journey. We had already left my home state of Minnesota and were halfway through Wisconsin. It seemed that these people were on a mission, and it must be an important one because by now we had a full police escort. I still couldn't understand why someone would be interested in taking my home from where it had always stood. We continued through Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. I thought we must be getting close to wherever we're going. By now we were just through Pennsylvania, and I began to see tall buildings and crowded streets. These were things I had never seen before since my family and I had never ventured very far away from our homes. I was used to the country. I could see new helicopters flying by and more police than you can imagine. Suddenly the truck came to a stop. We had ended up right in the middle of New York City. There were hundreds of people there just staring at the truck, which was carrying me and my home. After a few minutes, I saw something that looked familiar to me. It was the huge crane and all of the men that had loaded me up onto this truck in the first place. They had all gathered around again, this time with chains and ropes. I was hooked up to the crane once again. Amazingly, it was able to lift my home straight up and place it directly into some type of metal holder to support my home since I had no foundation anymore. I was still scared to death and hid inside so that nobody would see me. I was tired and hungry, but remembered I had a little food tucked away so I wouldn't have to go out to find something to eat. Men were constantly climbing up and down, wrapping all sorts of shiny paper and strings with colorful bulbs around my home for the next few days. I stayed hidden in the shadows and tucked away in my bed most of the time, hoping they wouldn't realize that I had been inside the whole time. Finally, about a week after the constant confusion and watching the humor of the men, things finally seemed to start calming down. As I woke early in the morning, I realized that there were no men or trucks outside. I didn't know where they had gone, and I really didn't care. Finally, for the first time in over a week, I had the place to myself. As I looked over the city, I could see people hurrying down the sidewalks and the cars moved very slowly down the streets. The buildings were like towers, unlike anything I had ever seen in my lifetime. The day went by quickly and the evening was upon us. I started to notice people gathering outside. Every minute there would be at least 50 people walk up. Before long, there were hundreds of thousands of people outside my home again. I was beginning to get a little scared again, not knowing what all these city people were gathering around for. It was much easier for me to hide now that the men had attached all the wires with bulbs and other objects to the outside. So I crawled to the highest spot and climbed out just a little where I could watch as the people began to join in song. It was getting dark by now, and I was just able to see the ground from where I was sitting. The people didn't seem so big from where I was. They seemed almost as small as me and my family. Suddenly, I hear a man's loud voice start to count. 10, 9, 8. I began to get a little worried and headed back inside. 7, 6, 5. You could have heard an acorn drop. 4, 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, the whole city seemed to light up as the crowd screamed two very important words. Merry Christmas! I soon realized that I had been on a very important venture. My home had been chosen to stand in Rockefeller Center in the middle of New York City. I had just taken part in the annual lighting of the New York City Christmas tree. Look at that pretty tree.
I think it's New York City Christmas, New York City.
Yeah.
That's what you said.
Yeah.
We had to go right there.
I think so too. I wasn't so sure how a little squirrel like me was going to be able to keep out of sight in such a brightly lit tree, but I knew I'd be okay and realized my adventure had probably just begun.
How you got that white teeth?
Isn't he cute? She's looking at the squirrel in the back.
Oh yeah, and her teeth.
The teeth. Christmas time in New York City with the best seat in the house. What more could a little country squirrel named Larry ask for? As I thought of my friends and family back home, the only thing I could think of was, wow, if they could only see me now. And that's the adventures of Larry the Squirrel. Hope you will go to Amazon and purchase this book. And y'all have a very Merry Christmas. And we'll see you next time with Reading with Skye. Bye-bye.